With unparalleled access to personalized casework, thought leadership, and unique resources and tools, AFA is united through its mission, advocacy that fits. A quick technical note, as we're getting started today, we encourage everyone to participate and ask questions throughout the presentation, so you can type those into your question box in the GoToWebinar control panel. We'll answer those questions during the Q&A segment at the end of the presentation. We're also recording today's program, and it will be available for download on AFA's Learning Center, along with the presentation deck within 48 hours. If you experience any technical difficulties, please contact GoToWebinar support at 1-800-263-6317. Presenting today from IDFL, we have Wilf Lieber, who is CEO, James Moore, who is the Asia CEO, and Brian Mortensen, who is Global Audit and Certifications Manager. Wilf Lieber has been the CEO of IDFL for 25 years and serves as a technical advisor to industry associations in North America, Europe, and Asia. He has developed many of the standards used in the down and feather industry. James Moore is the CEO of IDFL Asia. He holds a bachelor's in Chinese from Brigham Young University, a PhD from Zhejiang University, and in entrepreneurship and management, and is currently finishing his MPA at Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Brian began his work at IDFL in early 2013 and has been instrumental in the development of the IDFL Audits and Certifications program. As an auditor and certifier, he knows the textile certification standards in and out. Our three key learning objectives that we'll cover today include the benefits and drawbacks of using polyester filling materials, the tests and certifications that ensure recycling compliance, claims for polyester, as well as the verification of ethical supply claims, and the relationship between polyester fiber attributes and product performance. So with that, James, please begin.
Thank you, and thank you to all of those. Thank you, and thank you to all of those that are listening with us today to discuss this very important topic. So for the agenda, we're going to first do a brief introduction of IDFL, and then we're going to do a polyester overview and talk about some polyester key tests. Wilf will be doing that portion, and then we'll turn it over to Brian for certifications. And then we're excited to get some questions from you and hopefully provide some insightful answers. IDFL, to start off, IDFL is accredited and members of many international organizations. And we have many global clients and brands that work with us. Some of you may be seeing your brand on this screen. We work with bedding companies and brands. We work with outerwear companies and brands. There's many different clients that we work with, from the suppliers all the way to the actual brand. Screen's frozen, so just give me a second. There we go. Okay. IDFL offers everything from cradle to grave for quality assurance services for the field textile products, so bedding and outerwear products. We could break our services up into two main areas. One would be the testing services. Those include synthetic field testing like polyester and nylon, as well as natural field testing like down and feather, cotton and wool. We also test textiles, so just call it cotton and polyester. We also do finished product testing for outerwear and bedding products. The next area of our services would be audits and certifications, where we focus on RDS, GRS, downpass GOTS, and many other standards. We also do inspections, sterilization permits, and consulting for product development or other research projects that you may have that deal with field textiles. We're located all over the world. We have physical office locations in Salt Lake City, Europe, and China, Taipei, Vietnam, Turkey, India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. But we also have staff located in Japan, Ukraine, Cambodia, Nigeria, Korea, Spain, and Myanmar. If you have any needs or any questions and want to reach out to us, you can see our email there at the bottom left corner. info@idfl.com, and we'd be happy to get you in touch with the office and where you might need services. So with that brief introduction, let's now get into the meat of our presentation about polyester, and I'll be turning the time over to Will Flieber, our CEO.
Thank you, James. It's a pleasure to meet with you today and talk about polyester. As many of you might know, IDFL has been involved in down and feather testing for 42 years. But for over 20 years, we have been involved now in polyester filling and all the testing and requirements of polyester. It is the fastest growing segment of our testing business. Polyester is a relatively new fiber. Down and feathers have been used for some 2,000 years in various products. In Egypt, they had feather and down, and Europe began commercial manufacture of bedding products of about 300 years ago. But polyester began to be established in the age of plastics. Most of you are too young to remember when the great invention of plastic took place in the 1950s and 60s, where plastics were destined to replace every material on the planet. The first polyester-related patents were issued in 1941, and in 1951, it was introduced to the public as a miracle fabric. It took some time, though, to replace and compete directly with cotton and the other fibers. It was viewed as just a cheap product, and it declined actually during the 70s as a popular fiber. But with the intense research and development efforts, new kinds of polyesters were developed, better treatments, more proprietary types of forming of the polyester fibers, and polyester increased then for the past 20 years in use. It is the largest segment of the filled textile industry. Polyester filling is filled into more bedding than any other fiber in the world now. We began, as I said, some 20 years ago, our testing in polyester. Benefits of polyester. First and foremost on everyone's mind, expense. Polyester is very inexpensive compared to the other natural fibers. Polyester can be created from recycled sources. This is very important in our effort for sustainability and circular economy. Polyester is easy to care for. Some of the problems with wool and other fibers of shrinkage and misperformance can be taken care of with regular care in polyester. It's fairly easy to wash and take care of those. Durable. Polyester doesn't degrade. This is also a negative that we'll talk about in the drawbacks of polyester. And it's versatile. It can be formed into fiber balls, it can be formed into garnetted paddings, and it can be loose filled into jackets and bedding. Drawbacks of polyester. I think the biggest drawback for all of you that sell polyester products is the impact of matting and clumping. As you wash polyester finished products, you have a matting and clumping effect with some of the, especially much cheaper polyesters, that impact its ability to insulate, impact its ability to properly form the product. There's also an environmental impact. It's an oil derivative, polyester. It has limited recyclability. We make the material, the polyester fibers, out of recycled PET bottles, but as you continue to recycle and recycle polyester, it does degrade in performance to a point that you may not want to use this. Because this whole recycling effort is so new, we don't have a lot of research on how long the polyester fibers can be recycled. There's another unintended consequence of polyester, and that involves microfiber shedding. As natural fibers shed and break apart, they are degradable. They do not cause a long-term environmental problem. but as microfibers of polyester shed, they remain in the soil and the water supply for generations. It's estimated that 75% of German beers actually contain microfiber particles of plastic from shedding from various polyester or plastic materials. It is that pervasive in the environment. Why do we test polyester? First and foremost, we test polyester to make sure that we are getting what we pay for. When you purchase bulk polyester to fill in a jacket or fill in a sleeping bag or a pillow, you want to make sure that that polyester is what you specify. And second, is it going to perform when combined with the textile fabric? Is the polyester product going to perform the way I had designed it to do? So these are the two reasons that we would test polyester. We're going to talk now a lot about the polyester testing, but I would pick up one item for you, and that is specifications. In many, many cases, we see polyester specified as loose polyester with no specification as to staple length or any of the other tests that we're going to describe. So I would like you to look at all your specifications for polyester-related products and make sure that you have a very, very robust specification. And if you don't, IDFL can help you develop that. There are three groups of polyester tests. Number one are the tests on the fiber itself. There are product performance tests that we make on a finished product. And there are tests on the fabrics that encase polyester filling. The identification of the filling material is critical. You may get other fibers mixed in with your polyester. We use chemical and other solvents to process and make sure that the material that you're claiming polyester is actually polyester. This kind of fiber identification test is critical if you're mixing polyester with spandex or perhaps a down of feathers as a composite material. You need to be able to identify what percentage of each type of fiber is in your filling material. Daniel, one of the key attributes, one of the key factors that go into the performance of material, the thickness of the fiber. You have this in yarns for various products, cotton, but in polyester filling material, that thickness of the fiber can go a long way to influence the loft, the firmness of the material, the thermal insulation or heat retention, and its compression. Staple length, that's a basic element of polyester. Average staple length. So we take a piece of fiber and we measure, we stretch it out and measure it very carefully, and we measure hundreds of fibers to end up at an average staple length. The staple length can affect matting and clumping. If you have certain lengths of fiber, you can have a looping effect when you wash the material. Also, a mix of staple lengths can affect performance. You may specify 35 millimeter fiber, but the staple lengths in the fiber that you receive, some are 20, some are 40, some are 60. The average may be 30, but they may be a mix of fibers that do not react well. In other cases, to achieve a certain performance, you may want to mix longer and shorter fibers. Crimp frequency and type. Polyester fibers may appear to be just straight fibers, but they are actually zigzag. They have this crimp in fibers. And what we want to do is measure how many crimps per inch and how many crimps per centimeter to determine that amount of crimping. And the crimp frequency can help a lofting. There are two types of crimping. There is a mechanical crimp that is achieved by rolling metal rollers with a crimping mechanism in them, and then set those crimps via heat box into the zigzag shapes. A more expensive and longer lasting crimp is called the spiral crimp, and that is done at the time that the polyester fibers are extracted from the feedstock. Let's say it's pet bowels or the oil derivatives. A spiral crimp will last longer. Crimp will last longer and provide a greater loft and improved thermal retention. The inside of a polyester fiber is intriguing. Most people don't realize it, but there are two types of fiber. There is a solid fiber, the one picture you see on the top there, just a pure solid fiber, and there are hollow fibers. And you see in that picture, the little darker picture, many of those fibers in there have hollows. The percent of the fiber that's hollow makes a difference on heat retention and compressibility. Hollow fibers can be split into 2 chambers or 4 chambers or more chambers to provide additional flexibility. We analyze the material and tell you, does the material contain hollow fibers or solid fibers or a ratio? Sometimes materials are mixed and we have some solid and some hollow fibers. You need to specify, based upon the performance that you're wanting, what kind of fiber you want. We will provide to the email addresses of everyone that attends some more detailed explanations as to which fiber should be used in which circumstance and to achieve what performance. Opening ratio. Probably the most critical part of a filling material is the percent of fibers that are opened. And what we mean by opened, when a bulk polyester comes to your factory, to your sewing factory, it's often closed. The material on the right-hand side of the screen, very densely packed. It is mostly closed material. It will not perform properly. It will not provide the loft, the thermal insulation that you need. Therefore, there's a special carding machine that opens up these polyester fibers that are densely packed together, and you do that just before you create the polyester padding or before you fill the loose filling into the chambers of the finished product. IDFL takes this sample of this and we weigh how much of the material has been opened and is very loose and how much is maintained in that dense material you see on the right-hand side. And that will make a big difference. If you only have 70% ratio, you may have a 20, 30% drop in loft height of your pillow or blanket. Let's talk about the finished product performance tests. There are a couple of tests that deal with pillows. One is pillow firmness. As you all know, when you go to the store, there's firm pillows and medium pillows and soft pillows. How do we measure that? IDFL has a mechanism to mimic a human head sitting on a pillow, and we measure how much compression occurs when that mechanical head is sitting on a pillow. Thermal insulation is critical for blankets. How much material, grams per square meter, do you need to achieve a specific thermal insulation value? Matting and clumping. It is critical that your product perform after washing. You see some of the claims on these materials, my pillow is washable an unlimited amount of times. Well, that's probably not true. After a certain amount of washings, you have matting and clumping, which can impede the performance of the pillow. Compression and recovery, also related to cushions and pillows. Flammability. We don't think about this, but polyester is very flammable, and it flames in a very unfortunate way. When feathering down or cotton burns, it burns slowly, it kind of smokes, but it doesn't engulf in flame and doesn't reach high temperatures. When polyester material burns, it melts at extremely high temperatures, and that melting process can create such a high temperature that it can breach a mattress that even has a impermeable cover for stopping flammability. It can breach that and cause a flash flame inside of a bedroom. So you have to be careful and make sure that you're passing all of the tests that might exist in your particular state or in foreign countries. Filling weight. This is the easiest way for vendors to cheat on the pillow material or a blanket or a jacket by reducing the filling weight. If you order 60 ounces in your quilt and they put 40 ounces, you may not even notice it, even as a buyer. But the material then is 1/3 missing, will reduce its insulation and give you a product that wasn't what you purchased. Dimensional stability. How does that product do after washing? Does it shrink? Does it misform? Corner evaluation is a specific thing. As the material is washed, often we see in pillows that the space in the corner becomes less and less filled as the material begins to mat together. So we evaluate those corners on pillows and cushions to make sure that they're still usable after multiple washings. Fabric tests. They have to meet your specifications. The fabric that encase a jacket or a pillow must meet your specifications. IDFL, we do all the standard fabric tests, the basic physical tests, the color tests, and chemical tests that you needed. Most important for any filled product, including polyester, is fiber proofness. Will the fibers that are contained in the product leak through usage or through washing? Many people just neglect to even check fiber proofness. But we have seen a lot of product where after usage or washing, polyester fibers are migrating and causing problems on your product. So you need to check the fiber proofness. It's a similar test to what we do for down proofness. Now I want to talk quickly about recycled polyester. Recycled polyester is the game for many of you that are retailers or brand names. You want to recycle everything. The question is, when you order recycled polyester, are you really getting recycled polyester? In the olden days, the recycled material was not wanted, but today recycled material is often sold for higher than the virgin material. We see that in down and feathers, that recycled down and feathers are fetching incredibly high prices as the material is limited in quantity and very, very high in demand. The same is true for polyester testing, for polyesters that are claimed to be recycled. Can we test for recycled polyester? Yes, but that's a qualified yes. In most cases, we can determine by looking under the microscope at polyester fibers whether the material has come from original feedstocks in the chemical industry or recycled PET bottles. There are little defects, little markers that are contained in those fibers that allow us to determine. But it's not 100% sure that we can do that. But it is a test. If you request us to look at virgin versus regenerated polyester fibers, we can do that test for you. Now, how does polyester that has been recycled affect performance of the materials? So far in our research and study, we have found very little difference in performance. The only problem may be in the combining of recycled materials. This is where we give everyone caution to be careful when you look at your polyester, because they may be mixing recycled polyester with new polyester. They may be recycling polyester in different locations and then mixing it later. If it comes from the same feedstock of PET bottles, it should be fine. You should have a uniform performance. But if you're mixing polyester fibers, then you could have these problems of, one set of part of the material is very high staple length, another is lower staple length, et cetera, et cetera. To avoid those problems, you need to have a specification for your recycled polyester, just as you do for new polyester and make sure that that specification is very robust to include staple length, denier, all of these other characteristics of the polyester fiber. Another question is regarding the labeling of recycled polyester. Most of the countries that regulate bedding products and outerwear products have fallen behind in their ability to allow labeling. In the United States, for example, until very recently, polyester was not allowed on the law tag label, that official label. So you just, it was just looked like regular polyester. But the state of Utah has just passed a law that allowed the use of recycled on the law tag label and in all advertising and promotion materials. This will probably be spreading to other states in the U.S. to allow the use of recycled, and not in a negative spot, in a positive view that we're using recycled materials to achieve a better circular economy. But it's something that has to be aware, you have to be aware of when you're selling material in other markets, the actual legality of labeling something polyester and recycled polyester. This really finishes my portion of the program. I'm anxious to look at the questions you may have. Just write those in the chat section and we'll try and get to them. If we can't today during our Q&A, we'll respond to you individually via email.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much, Will. I have the honor and privilege to discuss and to present the certification part of our presentation today. As mentioned by Wilf, as a perfect segue into certifications, there is a huge growth in the industry of recycled materials and in the recycled industry. Brands have made amazing commitments to begin using more and more recycled materials throughout different value chains, including different materials such as polyester, nylons, cottons, down feather, acrylics, and even non-textile materials. As just one instance of that, in 2017, many of the large brands, and maybe some of the brands that you are here representing today, made commitments to begin recycling materials and by about 25% by 2020. And in fact, with this specific group, it didn't take them even more than a year to reach that goal. By 2018, they'd already maxed that goal, and they'd almost doubled that by 2020. Interestingly enough, as this group of brands is continuing to grow and to make even more and more commitments to using recycled materials, we know that about right now in the apparel industry, there is only about 14% of the total recycled materials that are actually being used, and they're trying to increase that now by 2025 to about 45%. And so I think within this next 4 years, we are going to continue to see a huge increase in the recycled materials, especially with polyester, but also these other sustainable materials in the recycled industry. And as part of that, as Wilf mentioned, there's many ways that you as a brand want to verify and ensure that you're getting your recycled materials and that they are being able to meet the requirements in your markets that you're selling, and to be able to provide, truth in marketing, provide that proof for that verification that for sure you're using a recycled material, or you're receiving organic material, or a material that has good animal welfare. And certifications are what provide that, or at least one way to provide that proof and that verification. Today, I'd like to talk about two specific standards in the industry right now, who are probably the most popular standards globally for the recycled materials. And that's because these two standards apply to not only textiles materials, but also non-textile materials, and can be used in a multitude of ways throughout the industry. And this would be first the recycled claim standard and the global recycled standard, GRS. Next slide, please. Thank you. We'll first talk a little bit about the principles of the recycled claim standard, RCS, as it's known. The RCS really everything begins and starts at the recycler. And partly that's because of the ability at the recycling process to be able to identify, number one, the reclaimed material supply chain, and also to identify what the process of the recycling is. And that's an important part of the recycled industry, is to ensure and to identify that the process of recycling is actually a recycling process and not a form of reuse or resource efficiency, but is actually taking a waste material that has been reclaimed, whether from a post-consumer or pre-consumer source, and then being processed correctly through a recycling process to a new feedstock for other materials or other products going into the supply chain. And so that's, again, where it starts as the material recycling certification. At this point, the recycler needs to verify and have a management system for their reclaimed materials. And that is including identifying their suppliers of reclaimed materials and being able to receive verifications of that, having sometimes tests in place to verify those reclaimed materials, and then to have also a process or management of the recycled processing. And it's our job as a certification body to ensure that this part of the standard is done correctly, because this is the most important part of the standard, identifying the recycling material and being able to ensure that it's actually a recycling process and not a resource efficiency or inefficiency or other reuse of materials that doesn't necessarily count as a recycling process. And so that is the starting point of the supply chain for certification, and then additionally moving forward based off of a chain of custody requirements, verifying that claim all the way up to the brand, and therefore the retailer getting those products from the brands being able to make a truth in marketing claim that their materials are recycled. Now we'll talk about the principles of the GRS certification. Next slide. So interestingly, the recycled claim standard and the GRS, or global recycled standard, are the exact same standard when it comes to the management of the reclaimed materials and the recycling processing, and also that of the chain of custody requirements, which include typically receiving a transaction certificate from that point of recycling to the brand as a point of verifying those materials. However, the GRS certification program has three additional requirements or criteria that must be met, which I think are very important criteria in this recycling sustainability world that we're in, that have to be met. And so the first one is the social requirements, and the social requirements include anything from verifying that there's no forced or bonded labor or child labor, ensuring that there is health and safety of the workers, and that verifying wages and working hours. The social requirements are an important part of ensuring that recycled materials are not only coming from a verified recycled recycled source, but also that of coming from a very humane and ethical source as well. And that also ties into the environmental requirements, that of of energy use, water use, wastewater, emissions to air, and also their own waste management, being able to ensure that recyclers are also finding ways to get rid of their own waste in a responsible manner. And very last of all, an important requirement is the chemical requirements. And the chemical requirements of the GRS ensure that there's no harmful or hazardous materials put into these recycled or these certified materials that are against any sort of guidelines and ensure that the chemicals are not getting back into the environment or back into especially in the textiles, getting onto people's skin and causing issues or damage in future generations. Next slide, please. So IDFL offers those standards of the recycled materials. We also offer additional standards for down and feather, animal welfare standards, also such as the responsible down standard and that of the organic claim standard, OCS. We're currently going through the GOTS accreditation. We should be able to hopefully offer this service to many of our clients here within the coming months as well in 2021. But just to quickly go over the certification process with each of you, it's a pretty straightforward process. Many of you are probably familiar with it, but it starts off with the application. Essentially, we have an application form that you fill out, has a few questions. We take that application form, we review it and check it, and we maybe have a slight call with you to discuss the information and the scope, both of your facilities and your products. And once we have a good idea of what we're going to be certifying, we then can provide you with a quotation and agreement, which you sign and you verify and say, okay, we agree with this. And then we go ahead and start the formal evaluation process, which includes, first of all, a documentation check, where you go through and provide certain information that we're going to look at, like your management system, your production records, the training records, and list of social policies, etc., to be able to understand what type of company you are and how you're managing your certified materials. After we get a good idea of what documentation has already been prepared, we then assign an auditor to go to your facility, who will then again do some part of the documentation check, but also the management of tour and facility tour of how you are producing your products and ensuring that those are also meeting the requirements of the standard. And the great thing about certification process is it's not necessarily a pass or fail type of thing, especially initially. So we go on site as an auditor, we determine, hey, these are some of the what we call non-compliances of the standard, an NC, and we communicate with you those things that are maybe an issue, and give you an opportunity to correct them. And typically you have a number of days, 30 or 60 or 90 days, to look at how you can correct those issues and be able to essentially work your way to a certified status. Once those corrective actions are taken care of, we go ahead and make a certification decision based off of the information that we have, the evaluation report, and then we issue the certificate, which is typically good from anywhere from 1 year to 2 years, depending on the standard that you have. Next, please. So just to kind of wrap up here, a little bit of our overall meeting and also part of the certifications. Many of you can ask the question, well, why choose IDFL? As James mentioned early on in the meeting, we have, first of all, many global locations throughout the world. This last year, we've extended our physical locations by almost more than half. We've added offices now in India and Bangladesh and Turkey and Pakistan, and even into the regions near Vietnam and Myanmar, Cambodia. And so we are now reaching out globally, having staff located in global locations where we can be able to serve a broader group of people, and not only for that reason, but also offer you a better service. And that when we have more global reach and that we are able to directly manage, at least it leads to cost efficiencies, it leads to faster certifications, it leads to better communication, and to be able to really offer you a better, faster, smarter service in the overall scheme of the certifications and also our other testing services. IDFL, and it has been around for over 42 years now in the testing industry, that we have in the certifications and audits. We've been in the supply chains since pretty much over about 2012, so over 10 years now of auditing supply chains and particularly focusing on textile materials. So last but not least, IDFL would love to be your one-stop shop for not only testing but certifications, from your quality assurance to your verification of recycled materials or organic materials, and to be able to offer you a full range of services to help you. Next slide, Nick. Oh, looks like it. There we go. So we're about to jump into our Q&A, and I'll pass that over here in just a minute. But for any questions or concerns, as you see here, we would welcome you to reach out to us, to our testing locations, our audits and service locations, even our inspections, to reach out to us and get to know us. We'd be happy to meet with you. We do webinars with brands and groups and with your suppliers to be able to help you move into and meet your goals as brands and suppliers. So thank you very much for your time today.
Great. Thank you to our speakers today. Thank you, Wilf, James, and Brian. We'll go ahead and jump into some question and answers now. So as a reminder, if you do have any questions for our panelists today, you can type those into the question box in your control panel, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. It looks like we've already had quite a few questions come in, so if there are any questions that we don't get to, we will follow up after today's program. Looking at recycled materials, something that we touched on earlier in the program, can one of you talk about maybe chemical risks that a company should be looking out for in sourcing recycled polyester specifically, especially if you're using those materials in highly regulated product categories like children's products? What chemical risks could a company be looking out for or want to maybe test for with recycled polyester specifically?
There really are no chemical risks with the polyester materials any more than the virgin materials, because the process of going through and melting everything down and really getting down nearly to the molecular level in creating these polymers that create the polyester fibers involve really removal of all the things that would be a problem. I have not yet heard of a difficulty with the recycled polyester. Obviously, there may be things I don't know. I'd like to research that question a little deeper and get back to you in the handout that we'll send those that have their email address in the attendee list.
That's helpful. Thank you. On the microfiber issue of sustainability concerns around washing polyester and synthetic garments, is there a test to determine and maybe compare the shed of microfibers from certain materials at this point?
Good question. Yes, we do have some testing that will measure the amount of microfiber particles in a wash cycle or dry cycle. So we can provide that information to you to compare material from one vendor or of a different design. And the downproof test also, or the fiber proof test, will also give you an indication of how that microfiber shedding may turn out as we see the migrating and escaped particles from filling through the fabric. Great,
thank you. So as far as labeling goes, that's a big topic for companies. Of course, if you're using recycled materials, you want to be able to educate your consumer and be transparent with them about the source of those materials and let them know that it's in fact recycled material. But in order to do that, especially with something like recycled polyester, what questions can companies be asking their vendors to get proper documentation to substantiate a recycled polyester claim? And is there a requirement for a specific structure paper trail in order to substantiate a claim as far as the FTC is concerned?
The general requirement for any product claim, whether it be advertising, on the labeling, point of sale, signage, is that whatever claim you make, you can back it up. There are a lot of claims made out there that are not being backed up properly. But as far as the recycle claim, if you have a GRS or an RCS certificate that's associated with your product, which means that you probably want to audit and certify all the way to the brand name or the retail store to make sure that the supply chain is can be verified to be of recycled sourcing. That's probably the best way to back up. Also, if you have any question or concern or worries about the polyester fiber, test polyester regenerated versus virgin polyester test that we perform will give you some answers and give you an indication, yeah, this material does contain recycled polyester. But backing up your claim is critical. So whatever claims you make on your product in general, you should have a checklist of how are we going to back up. And your legal teams in your various brand names and retailers are probably harping on this all the time as they work with you on compliance to make sure whatever marking claim you have some backup. Certification, GRS, RCS, and polyester testing can help you back those up.
Well, speaking of the GRS label, a question about that is a brand who might want to get to use the GRS label. What certification process would they need to go through to get certified from the brand position?
This is a great question. Thank you. As far as getting GRS certified, unfortunately for brands at the moment, at least, it's quite difficult because the GRS certification requires that the social compliance, not only do the brand headquarters need to be certified, but also any of these subcontractors that they work with, warehouses, 3PLs, and additionally some of the distributors that may be working with them. And so for large brands, this is a huge undertaking for certification. This is actually under review at the moment with the new standards with Textile Exchange, who is the owner of the GRS, is aware of this issue. They're taking into consideration some revisions into this in this coming year to kind of help, and still assure the integrity of the standard, but at the same time look into reducing some of the problems with brands getting certified, especially because at that point, it's very low risk. It's already a finished product. So there's going to be some changes coming to this and being able to allow brands to be better or easily certified. If I was a brand at this point, though, and I wanted to still have a certification and GRS just didn't work for me, RCS would probably be the next best go. You can still use GRS incoming inputs, and you can make that kind of, a general claim if you would like. Say we use GRS incoming materials, but to still be able to make an RCS claim on the recycled.
Great, thank you. So along those lines, in terms of using the logos for RCS or GRS on a tag, if the vendor provides certification from either of those bodies, how does a company license the logo to put that on their tag, or do they need additional permission to do so?
Yeah, so there's pretty strict guidelines on how the certification works with your labeling and logos. Essentially, if you want to claim a on-product certification, your company yourself have to be certified unless you are the retailer. If you are a brand selling direct to consumer, you can, in a way, borrow the license because in that way you're actually acting as a retailer, right? You are then able to kind of borrow the license from your vendor for those certified products. And so, but essentially, as a brand, if you're selling, and that's going to be an update in this coming revision as well. As a brand, you also need to be certified to be able to make those claims to your standards, unless you're selling directly to a retailer, or sorry, so you're selling directly to consumer as a retailer would.
Great, thank you. Could you speak to quickly whether there are chemical tests for regulations, RSLs, or other things that is included in IDFL's testing? Just basically kind of, could you reiterate the scope of your testing capability?
Yeah, we can do all the basic physical tests in each of our laboratories around the world. For some of the more complex chemical tests, IDFL has a joint operation laboratory with the CIQ, the Division of Chinese Government for Quarantine and Inspection, and our joint operating laboratory performs those tests in our China facility. So that may take a little longer, because we ship materials from the other offices to that facility that handles all of those chemical tests. But we provide the broad range of testing for the textiles and the polyester filling. As part of our package, we will send you the complete list of testings that you can have completed when sending material to IDFL.
Great, thank you. So today's program obviously focused on polyester and synthetic fills, but we've had conversations in the past on our webinars talking about more in depth on down and natural fibers. Can you talk through the performance comparison between those fibers that companies might use when they are considering which filling fibers to select?
Really good question. That question could take a whole seminar in and of itself, the comparison of polyester versus, let's say, down and feather. Gram for gram, down and feather has by far the best insulation value. And this becomes an issue with lightweight jackets, with the comforters, quilts, where thermal insulation is the basic need, that you're going to have a higher weight of insulation in polyester to provide the same insulation value as down and feathers. So that's one issue. The issue of matting and clumping is one when you compare the two products. Polyester does have that tendency to mat and clump. Down and feathers never mats and clumps. I've seen one case in an overheated dryer that kind of burned the material, but generally there's no matting and clumping in down and feather fillings. So those are two performance characteristics. One of the interesting things that polyester has is the ability to provide a padding, a padded, like a garnetted layer. So you could do very thin jackets and have that garnetted cut piece in polyester. There are new techniques now in down and feather that provide a batting type material containing polyester fibers, maybe 10% polyester fibers in a layer very high end down, that creates a very thin batting that you could use in sweaters, golf jackets, other materials. So that difference is evaporated now with the advent of down and feather batting. There are some other minor differences between the two, but companies like PrimaLoft and others have worked very hard to create down-like clusters that perform in a similar way to down and feathers. So polyester has improved in performance over the past few decades, but still gram for gram, probably twice as much weight is required in a polyester material to have the same insulation value. There's one very interesting study that was just commissioned last year, the life cycle analysis comparing a pound or a kilogram of polyester versus a kilogram of down. And the environmental impact of that polyester is much higher than anyone had actually anticipated in comparison to the down. And the reason for that is there's a lot of work that goes into raising a bird, but the 90% of the value of a bird is actually in the meat production, which is the great source of income, the protein, the meat in these various food processing industries. The down and feathers are simply byproducts of the meat industry in these Asian countries especially. And so the percent of environmental impact is very small when you consider the total percent of the polyester impact. And maybe we'll send you a link along with the material we're sending to this life cycle analysis, the comparison of polyester versus down and feather in environmental impact.
Well, appreciate that. I know that's a big question, and you all have the expertise to go on for a while on that topic. So I appreciate a high-level answer there. It looks like we've run out of time for questions, although we did have a few more come in. So we will follow up on those after today's program. So thank you again to our speakers, Wilf, James, and Brian, for joining us today. On behalf of AFA, I'd just like to thank everyone for joining our session today. And thank you again to IDFL for sponsoring today's program. An email with links to the PDF and recording from the program will be sent out to all attendees. And thank you again for joining us, and have a great day.